My child. There are moments in life that seem ordinary on the surface, yet behind the scenes, conversations are taking place that you know nothing about. Words are being spoken. Opinions are being shared. Thoughts are being exchanged. And sometimes, those conversations revolve around a person who has made a deeper impression than they realize. Today, I want you to imagine something. Imagine that somewhere, in a quiet room, a family gathered together. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud. Just a simple conversation. One topic led to another, and before anyone expected it, your name entered the discussion. At first, it may have been only a passing mention. But then something changed. Someone remembered a detail about you. Another person added their own observation. A third person shared something they had noticed. And suddenly, what began as a small comment became a much larger conversation. What was said? Why were they talking about you? And what could those words possibly mean? Stay with me, because this story becomes more interesting with every moment. The truth is that people often leave impressions they never fully recognize. You may walk into a room and think nothing special happened. You may speak a few words and forget them by the next day. Yet someone else remembers every detail. They remember your kindness. They remember your confidence. They remember the way you handled a difficult situation. They remember the energy you brought into a moment that others had nearly forgotten. And sometimes, those memories become the center of conversations you never even knew existed. Now imagine a family discussing someone important in their lives. As they speak, one person says something unexpected. There's something different about that person. The room grows quiet. Not because the statement was shocking, but because everyone secretly agrees. One by one, they begin sharing their own thoughts. Some remember a moment that revealed your character. Some recall a conversation that stayed with them. Others talk about the feeling they had after meeting you. And before long, a picture begins forming. A picture of someone who has made a stronger impression than they ever imagined. What makes this fascinating is that people rarely know the effect they have on others. You might believe your story is still being written. You might feel unnoticed. You might think that nobody is paying attention. Yet somewhere, your actions have already become part of another person's story. That is where today's mystery begins. Because this wasn't simply a conversation. It became a reflection. A moment where different perspectives came together. Each person saw something slightly different. Each person noticed something unique. Yet their thoughts seemed to point toward the same conclusion. There was something about you that stood out. Something difficult to explain. Something impossible to ignore. As the discussion continued, new details emerged. One family member mentioned your determination. Another mentioned your patience. Someone else spoke about your ability to remain calm when circumstances became uncertain. The more they talked, the more curious everyone became. Because every new observation revealed another layer. Another reason. Another possibility. Another clue. And soon, Even the people who had remained silent at first found themselves joining the conversation. Why? Because they also had something to say. They had noticed something too. The atmosphere shifted. Questions appeared. Ideas formed. Possibilities emerged. And somewhere within that discussion, a realization slowly began taking shape. A realization that nobody expected at the beginning. But before we reveal where this conversation is leading, there is something important you must understand. Not every meaningful discussion is loud. Not every important moment announces itself. Sometimes the most powerful revelations arrive quietly. They appear through simple words. Small observations. Ordinary conversations. And before anyone realizes it, those conversations begin changing how people see a situation. That is exactly what happened here. A simple discussion became something larger. A few comments became something memorable. And the deeper the family looked, the more interesting the picture became. What they discovered next surprised even them. Because one particular observation changed the entire direction of the conversation. An observation so unexpected that the room became completely silent for a moment. Nobody interrupted. Nobody rushed ahead. Everyone simply thought about what had just been said. And in that silence, a new understanding began to emerge. What was that observation? What did it reveal? And why did it suddenly make every earlier comment seem more important? Those answers are closer than you think. But the next part of this story uncovers the detail that transformed everything and revealed why your name became impossible for them to forget. A quiet realization was beginning to spread through that conversation. Not because someone revealed a secret. Not because anyone made a dramatic announcement. But because a pattern had started to appear. The family members were sharing different experiences, different memories, and different observations, yet all of them seemed to be pointing toward the same conclusion. At first, nobody noticed it. The conversation moved naturally from one thought to another. One person remembered a moment when you showed patience. Another recalled a situation where your words brought comfort. Someone else spoke about the way you carried yourself when things became uncertain. Individually, these details seemed small. But together, they created something impossible to ignore. The room became thoughtful. People leaned into the conversation. Not because they were searching for answers. But because every new detail revealed something they had not fully understood before. And then came the moment that changed everything. One family member paused. For several seconds, they said nothing. Everyone looked toward them, waiting. Finally, they spoke. I think we all noticed the same thing. The room fell silent. Nobody interrupted. Nobody rushed ahead. Because deep down, everyone wanted to hear what would come next. The person continued. It's not just what they do. It's how people feel after spending time with them. Suddenly, the conversation shifted. Those words caused everyone to think differently. Because actions can be forgotten. Events can fade. But feelings often remain. People began reflecting on their own experiences. And the more they reflected, the more interesting the discussion became. Someone mentioned that conversations with you seemed memorable. Another said that your presence often brought a sense of comfort. A third person admitted that even small interactions somehow stayed in their mind much longer than expected. No one could fully explain it. Yet everyone seemed to recognize it. The feeling that there was something uniquely genuine about you. And that realization opened an entirely new chapter of the conversation. What happened next surprised even the people sitting in that room. Because once they started talking openly, observations appeared that had never been shared before. Stories emerged. Moments resurfaced. Memories returned. Each one added another piece to the puzzle. And with every piece, the picture became clearer. The discussion was no longer about a single moment. It was about a pattern. A pattern that had quietly developed over time. One person said they admired your consistency. Another said they respected your attitude. Someone else described the way you treated people regardless of circumstances. As these thoughts filled the room, something unexpected happened. The family began seeing you through each other's eyes. And that changed everything. Because every person notices different details. Every person remembers different moments. Every person sees a different side of the same story. When those perspectives come together, a much bigger picture emerges. And that bigger picture was creating genuine surprise. The more they talked, the more they realized how often your name had appeared in positive conversations. Not once. Not twice. But repeatedly. Without planning. Without intention. Without anyone forcing the topic. It simply happened. Again and again. That realization left a strong impression. Because it revealed something many people never discover. The impact they have on others. You see, most people spend their lives wondering how they are perceived. They question themselves. They doubt themselves. They underestimate themselves. Meanwhile, others may already see qualities they haven't fully recognized. That was the direction this conversation was taking. The family was uncovering a perspective that had been hidden in plain sight. And every new thought made the mystery even more fascinating. Then another unexpected observation appeared. A family member pointed out something nobody had considered before. They explained that your influence wasn't based on grand gestures. It wasn't based on dramatic moments. Instead, it came from something far more powerful. Authenticity. The room grew quiet once again. Because those words felt true. Not flashy. Not exaggerated. Simply true. And sometimes the simplest observations carry the greatest meaning. That realization caused everyone to think back carefully. They remembered conversations. Shared experiences. Small interactions. The more they remembered, the stronger the conclusion became. You had left an impression that extended far beyond a single moment. Far beyond a single conversation. Far beyond a single memory. And that realization continued growing. Nobody expected the discussion to become so meaningful. Yet it had. Because every person present had contributed a unique piece of the story. And those pieces were finally connecting. But then something happened that nobody anticipated. A completely new perspective entered the conversation. A perspective that would cause everyone to reconsider everything they had said so far. The moment it was shared, the atmosphere changed. Not dramatically. Not suddenly. But noticeably. People became more attentive. More thoughtful. More curious. Because this new observation explained something that none of them had been able to understand before. What was that observation? Why did it change the direction of the conversation? And what surprising realization was waiting just ahead? Those answers are closer than ever. And in the next part, the conversation reaches a turning point that nobody in that room saw coming. A remarkable shift was beginning to take place. The conversation had already revealed many observations, many memories, and many unexpected perspectives. Yet nobody in that room realized that the most surprising part was still ahead. What happened next was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was something far more powerful. It was understanding. As the discussion continued, one family member shared a thought that immediately captured everyone's attention. They said that whenever your name came up, the conversation seemed to become more meaningful. For a moment, nobody responded. Not because they disagreed, but because they were quietly realizing that it was true. Think about that. Out of all the people they could talk about, why did your name consistently create deeper conversations? Why did your presence seem to leave such a lasting impression? Why did people remember details that would normally be forgotten? Those questions filled the room. And the search for answers continued. One by one, people began sharing moments they had never spoken about before. Small moments. Simple moments. Moments that appeared ordinary at the time. Yet now, looking back, those moments seemed far more important. Someone remembered your kindness during a difficult day. Someone remembered your patience when others became frustrated. Someone remembered how you encouraged people without expecting recognition. Each memory added another layer. Each story revealed another piece of the puzzle. And slowly, a realization started to emerge. The impression you left behind was not based on one event. It was built through consistency. Through character. Through the way you showed up again and again. That realization surprised everyone. Because meaningful influence often works quietly. It grows over time. It develops through countless small moments that seem insignificant until people finally look back and connect them together. That was exactly what this family was doing. Connecting the dots. Seeing the complete picture. Understanding something that had been there all along. And then came a statement that nobody expected. One family member smiled and said something that instantly changed the atmosphere. Maybe the reason we keep talking about them is because they make people feel valued. The room became silent again. Not because the statement was shocking, but because it explained so much. Suddenly, many earlier observations made perfect sense. People began remembering conversations where they felt understood. Moments where they felt respected. Situations where they felt genuinely appreciated. And they realized something remarkable. Those feelings had become connected to their perception of you. The discussion was no longer focused on what you had done. It was focused on what people experienced around you. And that distinction changed everything. Because actions can be measured. Achievements can be listed. But positive experiences remain in people's hearts long after details fade away. The family recognized that. The more they reflected, the stronger the conclusion became. You had become part of memories that people genuinely treasured. Not because of extraordinary events, but because of genuine moments. And sometimes genuine moments are the most powerful of all. As the conversation continued, another surprising detail emerged. Several people realized they had independently reached similar conclusions. They had noticed similar qualities. They had remembered similar experiences. They had formed similar impressions. Yet none of them had discussed those thoughts before. The realization felt almost unbelievable. Different people. Different perspectives. Different experiences. Yet somehow they had arrived at remarkably similar observations. That discovery created a sense of curiosity throughout the room. What else had they overlooked? What other connections existed? What other insights were waiting to be uncovered? The conversation became even more thoughtful. Nobody wanted to rush. Nobody wanted to miss a detail. Because each new observation seemed to reveal something valuable. And then another important realization appeared. The family understood that first impressions can be powerful. But lasting impressions are even more meaningful. Anyone can make an impression for a moment. Very few people create an impression that continues growing over time. That was the difference they were beginning to recognize. The qualities they discussed were not temporary. They were consistent. And consistency creates trust. Trust creates respect. Respect creates lasting memories. The more they explored these ideas, the clearer everything became. A picture had emerged. Not from assumptions. Not from imagination. But from countless real experiences remembered by different people. And that picture carried a message nobody expected at the beginning of the conversation. A message about influence. A message about perception. A message about the impact one person can have without fully realizing it. As the discussion reached this point, there was a feeling in the room that something important had been discovered. Not a secret. Not a mystery. Something even more meaningful. A deeper understanding. Yet the biggest realization had not arrived yet. Because one final perspective was about to enter the conversation. A perspective that would connect every observation, every memory, and every story into one powerful conclusion. The moment that perspective was shared, everything suddenly made sense. Questions found answers. Pieces found their place. And the true meaning behind the entire conversation finally became visible. What was that final realization? Why did it leave such a lasting impact on everyone present? And how did it completely transform the way they viewed you? Those answers are waiting in the next part, where the conversation reaches its most meaningful and unforgettable moment.